we talked a little bit about your dad, but I kind of want to talk a little bit about you. I mean, you're sending the message right now to the people out there watching the show, and you're kind of describing how you were an advocate for your dad before anybody else was. I mean, you know, and I know that you did have some support, but you know, how did you deal with it being the caregiver and being the advocate for someone out there who might be watching, who is in a situation where they need to tell their dad or husband to get their butt to the doctor and get checked out, and really like fully embrace that? I mean, what would you say to them?
The only negative part for me, being his medical surrogate, his support system, was that even though he and my mom were close, my mom had polio when I was 3 years old. She was 24. So my mom was in a wheelchair. So it wasn't like, there were a lot of things that she could do. But mentally, she was in the kind of denial that I'm not advising earlier. She's just like, this is ridiculous. Your dad can't have cancer because he's never even been sick. So that kind of thing doesn't help. And the only really rough thing for me was that I did need to work these two jobs, which I loved working, but time is very, very much a challenge when I had to take my dad and pick him up. And, as many times, 5 or 6, 7 times that I said, Dad, I can do it, but I have to drop you off, and then, call me and I'll pick you up, but can you take your book with you? This poor, wonderful, delicious man would always take a book, because I couldn't just be there, like I couldn't be there 5 seconds after he called. But he never complained, and I always apologized. I mean, he's like, "Are you kidding?" He goes, "This book is amazing. I didn't even know you weren't here yet." So, I mean, I have a great story about it. Maybe it'll be more challenging for other people, but just knowing that that you get to have this time with, I mean, I wouldn't have done it if I didn't absolutely adore my dad. I mean, if I wouldn't do it for someone that I wasn't close with, or that I didn't have an intimate relationship with at the time in my life, because I didn't have a place for that kind of extra time. But for my dad, oh my God, what I got out of it was tenfold, 100-fold. The giggling and the phone calls, and, telling me that he's pretty sure if I got Gas X for him that he would be all better and the cancer would go away. He was so serious. And so I was on the phone. I remember doing that to my cheeks, going, oh my God, don't laugh, because if he believes this, he will feel better at this moment. And so the next day he called to say, I knew it.
It worked.
It worked.
It's effective.
So this is an ad for Gas X.
Now you know. Well, it sounds like, during this time you were arguably, the pillar of support during his time, through this. But, you mentioned a lot of people may not have that luxury of, time and distance being with their loved ones. And I would just like to point the importance to anyone that may be going through this, that even a phone call, just the routine weekly phone call can go such a long way. Like personally, I still have voicemails from my grandmother who passed, just because the power of like a loved one's voice works wonders. So the fact that you were doing that, physical contact, talking on the phone, taking to appointments, like you were the support system that people need, and that really allows 8 years of post-diagnosis, high quality of life. So I think that's something that you should be very proud of. Just me as a viewer, and the first time meeting with you in this way, it's really impressive, because you mentioned the denial factor, and I know you said your mom had the denial, and I'd be curious to wonder if you had a sense of denial too, but fought through it at all. Nothing, you knew right away. Yeah.
I appreciate what you're saying, though. I really do, because I never thought of, I mean, there's nothing heroic at all about what I did. And some days I was cranky. And, you know, there's that. But he knew that I loved him, and I absolutely knew that my dad loved me. So he just put up with me being cranky sometimes. And again, that crankiness was only because my time wasn't completely my own at the time. And so what, big deal. Because I don't even remember why. I mean, so what? So what? My dad needed me, and my kids, you know, wanted me. My kids were at their best when they knew that I was leaving them. I mean, they weren't little. I wasn't a bad mother. They were 12 and 15. But, you know, I had to also make sure they were doing their school responsibilities, but they would get along better and fight less and maybe even do their chores when they knew that I was doing something for their grandfather, which I hadn't really thought about either. So there's that, you know, and every family dynamic is so different. I think most people, I hate to generalize, have siblings. And I know so many, I have a hashtag I use all the time, screw cancer, but I know so many people that have gone through the challenge of different forms of cancer. I had 5 girlfriends last year, 5, all 5 are still alive. But it took entire families to help them, and siblings. And so, you know, here's a call out to, if you're, you know, at odds with your family and you think your health is perfect, I would really get out of odds with your family, because you don't know what's in store. You know, when you need somebody, that's a hard call to ask for help for anybody, especially men. Men don't ask for directions or help, so.
We're stubborn. We're stubborn at times.
I know I'm old enough to remember the days before GPS on the phone, and just being in the car with my grandfather and going on road trips, and my grandmother saying, can we ask for help because we're lost? And he's like, no, we'll find it. And I remember a couple times of having to get off the interstate and actually having to ask for help, but more times than not, he's like, yeah, no. So and that really is very reflective just on, you know, overall, I don't want to generalize, but men in general, how we're not asking for help for going to the doctor, or even, you know, dietary advice, anything like that. And I think that hopefully Stephen and I are really going to start bringing a change about. And I know that men's health as a whole is growing. And so hopefully just the combination of it, like, we're here just to get people, like, to help get people to realize how important their health is, and how just to not let anything go, because it's just not worth it.
I will add, the great news is that my husband, who my dad got to meet and love, as I told you, he had his last day with him. He is the exact opposite. As a matter of fact, when we first started dating, I thought he was a hypochondriac because he had so many doctor's appointments. You know, he has an allergist and a GP, and he had his physical every year. And I'm like, what is wrong with you? Like, that's weird. And so he is the person that makes me go to the doctor, honestly. God, I hope that didn't ruin everything I've said. But I mean, I always have my checkups, but I just, like, if I don't feel good, he goes, why don't you just go to the doctor? I go, I am not doing that. So he is definitely the first to go if he feels like he's getting something, or his allergies are coming, or he gets his blood test, his prostate exam, colonoscopy, everything. I have never asked that man to make an appointment for himself, and he's never been late having one. So I will share the good news is that, you know, my mom and dad may have been deniers, but I married a really on task man. So he keeps me in line now. So yeah, so it's full circle.
Sounds like
We're glad to hear he's a
Men's Health Unscripted, honestly.
Yeah, you should get him to come in here. He'll tell you exactly how often you should do every appointment.
That's the thing. That's good though.
I'm glad to hear he's a shining example of what we want men's health to be.
Yep.
And even, I mean, talking to Stephen before this, I mean, before we went to pharmacy school, I don't think that we really ever considered going to the doctor. And now, like, we have required physicals and stuff like that. And then just doing this, I mean, we really have to live and practice what we're preaching. And, you know, thankfully I haven't had anything wrong with me, but I feel a lot more comfortable going to the doctor and understanding the healthcare system and how it works. I feel a lot more comfortable, and really all it takes is just, you know, finding somebody that you're comfortable with and that they're willing to, you know, explain things maybe in layman's terms and not just, you know, hit people with a bunch of medical terminology and knowledge. And that scares people away, and just being relatable. So that's kind of another one of the reasons we have this show, is to be relatable and be those good shining examples of men's health and healthcare professionals.
I think to add to that, Patrick, really what you said about being able to be comfortable with a new doctor and all of that, I think that is so important, because I have been to, I have spine issues, horrible spine issues, and I've been to 5 or 6 doctors and spinal surgeons, neurosurgeons rather, that have turned me off immediately on our initial meeting appointment, and I'd be in the car like, oh, that, just Xing him out, like don't even put him in my address book, because we can't afford to just say, that's okay, my insurance covers this doctor and he may be horrible, he may have a horrible personality, but you know, no, you can't, because what's going to happen is you're not going to want to go, and you're not going to want to, and you're not going to feel comfortable giving your symptoms and having a conversation and being open. It's very uncomfortable talking about your colon or, you know, your prostate. I mean, this isn't, you know, dinner conversation. You better be able to be comfortable enough to talk to your physicians or your nurse practitioners and physician's assistants, which my 2 stepdaughters are, and they're brilliant and amazing. And they've taught me a lot, you know, just being open and talking about terms. And I'm like, what are you talking about? I have no idea what that term is. And just learning ahead. Don't wait until, you know, people don't need to wait until they're sick to learn about, especially different little weird symptoms that you hear people talking about. Not to be a hypochondriac, but just to say, that's weird because I do have that thing that happens all the time. I didn't know that should be looked at. But I think having a decent, respectful, mutually respectful relationship with a physician, surgeon is urgently important.
I think it's a really underrepresented relationship that you're talking about, because it's one thing to go to the doctor for your annual checkup, but if you're not going to make the most of that checkup by being honest, then you're wasting your time. But what you're saying is to have a professional, almost friendly relationship to where you can openly talk about these things.
Yes.
And the alternative is not liking your physician versus, you know, enjoying the experience. So it sounds like you were active in finding, you know, and currently finding people that you can relate to. So when you're going through this with your father, I'm curious, you know, did you ever take the time to, you know, try to find resources to help you deal with this? Did the clinical staff offer anything to help you as a support system, help you through this? Did you have anything external to you helping your father that other people may be able to use?
It's a great question. It really is. And I don't want to let you down, but I didn't feel the need at the time. But I do know, I also had a great support staff at my church at Palmacia Presbyterian in Palmacia. And I did use that source because my dad went to church with us, and that was amazing. And my pastor was next to my dad's bedside when the day before he passed. So I started out saying no, and now I realize I'm saying yes. Sorry, I'm working through this. Okay, so I did have a great support system, and it was both my pastors and a few therapists through the church that we could check in with anytime we needed. And I absolutely forgot about that for a few moments. So I think when I finish this call that I'll reach out and send a thank you note, just for being that person in our lives at that time. So thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it goes to just show, I'm so thrilled that you were able to find that, outside of the hospital system, because, you can feel so isolated in those times that it's you, the family, and the hospital, and you forget that the whole community of people out there. So just to any viewers that may be going through this, other people in your social circles may also be going through this. So the communication doesn't stop with the family or the doctor. These are things that you can openly talk about, people, if you feel safe enough to discuss these type of things. So I really appreciate you, diving into your memory there to find valuable people. It's really powerful.
It's the over 60. It's like, yeah, if you get us talking long enough, we will remember two things.
It's just, we've had a couple of courses and just experiences of being a caregiver, and just talking about it. It can really be exhausting, and it's nothing against the person that you're taking care of, but I know a lot of people realize that they have their own lives to live, but also need to take care of someone and do a really good job at it is tough. And when you see someone that you're caring for and they're sick and it's kind of a tough situation, you have a tendency to put that on ourselves, that the care isn't optimal or anything like that. And it's really not the case. I mean, the fact that you're caring for a loved one is so important. And just, you reached out to your church, and you're mentioning the church therapist, which is a great resource, and a lot of people don't have access to that. And so we advocate for men's health, but we advocate for mental health a lot as well.
Yes.
And it's so important. Again, another topic that's just really not discussed. And if the mental health deteriorates, the physical health is surely, right behind it, just because then, if you want to start getting into the symptoms of depression, you don't want to wash regularly or take care of, self-care. And that's really a huge part of the mind-body experience that we use.
I do want to add that I didn't have a really hard time with it. When I did, I could go to my church people, but it hit me, even though I knew for 8 years my dad was going to die probably from this disease. And yet, no surprise to either one of you, I'm sure, it was really hard. It was really hard because things that I didn't think about prior to his passing, I drove by his apartment every day to go to work. I felt like I was going to throw up. There was no other way to go to work. I felt like I was going to throw up every day. I would cry so hard every single day going to work for like a year. And so I didn't wait a year. Maybe a couple of weeks later, LifePath Hospice, who are not human beings, they are angels walking on the earth. I have no idea how these people do anything that they do, but they do it graciously, beautifully, and miraculously. They reached out.
What was the name again?
LifePath Hospice.
LifePath Hospice.
And they reached out to me and said, you know, we just want to let you know that we have a group for mourning, but what am I,
Grieving.
grieving. And I said, oh, that's not really for me, which I don't know why I would say that. I believe in therapy. I believe in all that. But I was just like, well, that's being around sad people. That's what I was thinking. Being around sad people, definitely not what I want to be doing. That's not going to make me feel any better. But thankfully, I was wrong, because one day my car just steered its way. It was next door to my dad's apartment. So I think my dad like steered my car into the driveway one night. And they constantly emailed me the schedule of, you know, the grieving meetings. And I tell you what, I cried a bucket of tears the first night there, kind of hyperventilating, and clearly needed to do that. So that is another thing that I just wanted to bring to your attention, that there's something that costs nothing, that really helped me a lot. And every Christmas for 12 years, there is, it sounds so corny, but there's an ornament that they gave me. He passed in February, and in December, they mailed me an ornament with my dad's name on it. Like, who does that? And of course, hysterical crying. And every single year I put that ornament on the tree, I immediately remember how important it was that I did do that for myself. That, because I didn't need to cry in front of my kids or, you know, my friends. I was like, it would have been okay, but this was a place that said, sit here and you can cry right here. We're all going to cry right here. There is a safety in that, you know, that I,
sounds like it was very liberating for you.
That I do recommend. It was cathartic. So